And we are live.
Mhm.
Let me check if it's running on the other platforms. Everything. There you go. There you go. Yeah, this one is working. Welcome, everyone. Hello, hello. LinkedIn seems to be running live as well. Yes, perfect.
Awesome.
Let us know if you can hear us perfectly and let us know as well where you are. So write us a little
Oh,
comment
we
in the
lost
chat.
you
Tell us in everyone. Excellent. So we'll give people 2 to 3 minutes to join. Grab a coffee, grab a drink, and we'll get started in about 3 to 5 minutes. There you go. Okay. Excellent. We getting some comments. Hello, Kat.
Hi, Kat. Thank you for joining.
Excellent, excellent. So it's working. Let us know if you hear us well. If you
I'm getting a little bit
hear
of
both of us well.
feedback. I'm getting a little feedback from you there, Riley.
Okay. Are you using another? Are you also listening to it on LinkedIn?
Nope.
Okay, strange. Hello, Venus. Welcome. Excellent. Okay, Jerry. Hello, Jerry. Excellent. Okay, so the live seems to be running properly. I love that.
Hello.
Excellent.
So
Great.
excited for you to join.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. So we'll start in a go. Okay, the live chat is also running pretty smoothly. Excellent. 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 All right. Perfect. Welcome, everyone. This is a live podcast. So, again, for those who are new to the concept, your questions and comments live. We also want you to contribute. You are the third guest, you're the third actor in this session because we want you to come and share your questions with Darcie so we can have and let us know what you think and if you have any questions for our amazing guest today. Excellent. All right. All right. All right. All right. I think we can give it a start. It's 12.
Okay. I'm still
Okay.
I'm still getting a little bit of feedback from you. I'm not sure if
Okay.
that's just me or if the audience is getting that as well.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments if. Okay. I'll make sure I don't run too many streams at once. Okay. Can you hear me well, Darcie?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay. Excellent.
Cool.
Wonderful. Okay. So we have a lot of
Oh, you broke up again.
people in. Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me check my settings. Maybe I'm getting just too. Okay. Can you hear me well now?
Yep. It's coming in now.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. How's the audio for everyone? Can you tell me in the comments if you can hear each of us perfectly? If there's no lag?
Sounds like we're getting a little bit of a delay from you, Riley. Sorry. We'll
Nah,
get
no worries.
we'll
No
get
worries.
going in a moment, everyone.
Okay, perfect. Let's give it a start. I'll just take more time to get my questions out there. But
Okay.
it's not that big of a deal because you are the so
Okay.
thank you for being here today, Darcie. For the people who don't know you, who is Darcie?
Ah, that's such a big question. Well, as many of you know who are here, I started out my career as a designer. I've been working as a designer for going on 20 years. And the last 10 years or so, I've been working in software. And that's really what got me into collaboration and facilitation, which is what brought us here today. So, but a little bit more about my origin story. I actually come from an unincorporated town in Washington State called Brooklyn. And when I started my career, I moved to Brooklyn, New York. And that was really the beginning of who I am today. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned about throughout my career.
Awesome, excellent. And so, what are you doing now?
Yeah. So right now I am kind of on two paths. I am working as a facilitator. So I am starting to go out solo. I've been doing facilitation and collaboration work in the innovation space as I've been working in software. And I really see that there's an opportunity for that outside of big corporations. And so I'm offering services to help companies of all sizes and teams, managers, to improve their collaboration through facilitation and be basically a non-biased team lead in driving facilitation workshops and sessions. And then I have a background in user experience and software design, so I also offer freelance work and contract work in doing that.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to drop up a little ad. This is a live session, so you can ask your questions. You can interact with us through the chat. So let us know if you have any questions for Darcie. If you have any comments, feel free to write these down into the chat, and I'll pass it on to the special word, collaboration. And so my first question for you is, how would you define it? What is collaboration and what is not?
Yeah. So, I mean, by definition, collaboration is working together to create something. And I think the key word there is together. When in the work that I've done, I've seen a lot of what collaboration isn't. And so I thought we might start out with talking about that a little bit. So when thinking about working together, I think there gets to be a little bit of confusion on what that can mean. And sometimes the word collaboration gets thrown in there, and sometimes it isn't really working together to create something. So some of the things that I've seen in the workplace and either with clients or in talking with people that I've met throughout my career, collaboration isn't divvying up task loads between teammates. So if you have one project, somebody takes part of the tasks and somebody else takes part of the tasks, and they do that, and then they come together at the end to complete a project. That really isn't what we consider collaboration. In our modern world of having shared documents and shared files, that really isn't also collaboration. So the idea of commenting with changes in a shared document, that's a little less of working together on something. Another thing that we see, especially in the kind of hybrid and virtual workplace, is that people sit on meetings or videos and they're multitasking while in that session. So they're really only half paying attention, and a lot of times have their video turned off. So how can you actually talk to somebody or see somebody when your video is turned off. There's other things that we see. There's things like sending changes through email, and then maybe providing feedback that is not actionable. And I know one of the things we want to talk today about is feedback. So
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, so those are kind of the things that I think collaboration is not.
So what can we say, how can we define the essential principles of collaboration? What would you say, what is collaboration then?
Yeah. Well, kind of if I look at the things that I think collaboration isn't, we could talk about the things that I think collaboration is. And, actually, I think we had a question from Jerry in our comments on the live event about mentioning that there's confusion between communication and collaboration, and or communication and coordination, and that a lot of times people see collaboration as being a way of communicating or a way of coordinating. And I think those are kind of all the details that I've just shared that about what collaboration is not. And so when we think about kind of the flip side of some of those things, activities that lead to shared decision making and alignment are certainly something that we would consider collaboration. Team ideation, where everybody is contributing to the solutions, is another thing that we really see as being part of collaboration. Some of the things that I do is, producing goal-oriented workshops or sessions with tangible outcomes. So when you go into a quote-unquote meeting, and every meeting can be either a mini workshop or a collaborative session, you really have a goal in mind, and you want to meet those goals and come to the end of the session with outcomes that are actionable. The other thing is providing feedback that is more of a two-way conversation. So a lot of times people see in today's workforce feedback coming through email or maybe on Slack, and it's not really it's not actionable oftentimes, and it's not a two-way conversation. So that's something that I think we have to be careful of. And I think the other is a company that has a cultural shift in leading by transparency and trust. When we talk about collaboration in general, there's so much about it that is building trust with your teammates in a relationship. And I think that, especially in today's workforce, it's interesting. There is a topic about communication in general, and how the majority of communication is actually nonverbal. So nonverbal being communication that is through vocal, words only, and then the nonverbal is, hand movements, tone of voice, things like that. And so it's interesting because when we're working in a remote or hybrid kind of workforce, a lot of that nonverbal communication gets lost, and that is part of what helps build trust and relationships with people.
Very good. Excellent. We actually have a question from Jerry, and I want to share it with you so we can just rebound on the conversation. And the question is, what are some of the common blockers you see to affect action, and do you have any tips to overcome them? So I think that's part of today's conversation. So
Yeah.
we'll maybe address that a bit later. So maybe save this for later on. But I think that's definitely a great question. Thanks, Jerry. So I'm gonna save that into the bookmark. But before that, I want to dive a bit into this remote collaboration aspect. And most of us during the pandemic had to collaborate in a very different way, mostly remote. And it sort of agitated the problem a little bit more because we were suddenly moving from face to face to virtual. And for a lot of us, without preparation or explanation and things like that, and we developing wrong patterns, like you said, not turning on our cameras or not having collaborative boards. Did you experience those poor collaboration methods, and how did you feel about it?
Yes, I have. And what's interesting is, as you know, you and I worked together in an innovation labs at Red Hat. Even prior to the pandemic, we were working in a remote setting. And so I think we had a little bit of a jump start in how to work better together in a remote space. Um, and so I felt like I was prepared for that, going into the pandemic. I felt ready to find culture and collaboration through a virtual environment. But you can't account for everyone else, right? And so some of the things that I think I saw in particular is, it can be uncomfortable to be on video. I think that, not everyone in the world is comfortable, recording themselves through social media. And I think that's it's a very vulnerable kind of approach to communication that takes a little bit to overcome, like hearing yourself talking, seeing yourself on video. It's not something that everyone's comfortable with. And I think that was a really big change, right? And especially because you have people of all generations who work together. And some people, really kind of probably turn to a default of having their video off because that's what makes them feel more comfortable. However, that goes into that topic that I brought up earlier about nonverbal communication. You are immediately cutting off the majority of how people interpret you. And it's funny because I remember listening to a podcast once, because of course the other ways that we have reliance on is, email or maybe like some kind of virtual chat communication, right? Slack is very commonly used. And when you read the way that somebody writes a message, it can be like interpreted in a lot of ways. And so I was listening to this podcast once where they were reading emails in multiple tones of voice. They would read an email, a business professional email, in a tone of voice that sounded angry. And then they would read the email again in a tone of voice that sounded happy and enthusiastic. And it's amazing how different the interpretation can be depending on the tone of voice that you are imagining the sender to have. And so I think this is something that we run into a lot, not just in pandemic times, but currently. And I'm not sure that we really solved that problem. And so I think that's why, when it comes to collaboration, having a culture that's built around it, having everyone in the company being really excited about, working together and, kind of setting some like cultural rules, like a default to having cameras on. I worked on a product team for a couple of years over the last few years of my career, where we were located all over the world. We had people in Europe, we had people in India and South America, and in the United States. And I remember after several months or even like a year of working together, I started seeing this habit where people were turning their cameras off every time we would join. And the collaboration started to deteriorate. And so I think the other is keeping a culture of feedback where feedback is encouraged. And as a team, you feel okay with, letting people know what maybe isn't working well and being ready to update those, kind of cultural rules that you've set for the team. I see a question from Derry.
Yeah, this one is directly connected to the topic, so I'm going to share with you. So
Yeah.
you mentioned working with multi-generational teams. Have you noticed any patterns in how different generations feel about on the approach of collaboration, or how do they like to collaborate? So is there a need? Is collaboration different depending on which generation you are? And did you notice differences?
Yeah, in fact, so I can't say this equivocally, but I do research in my job, qualitative and ethnographic research. And so, Jerry, to your point, I have seen some patterns. I've seen a pattern where some of the younger generations millennials, and I think it's Gen Y that's below them, they are a little less inclined to, join a video chat, and are more inclined to rely on text and messaging. So, which is funny because when I think about my own family, like I have a niece and nephew who their main way of communicating is through text and messaging, and that's what makes them feel most comfortable. So, so I do see like kind of a pattern of some younger generations who are more likely to rely on, Slack messages. I see some older generations that are more likely to rely on email. So you kind of have on opposite ends of a generational spectrum, people relying on nonverbal communication. I can't really say like exactly like, okay, what about the generations in the middle? But what I do know is being a generation that's sort of in the middle, I was also part of some of the change, right? I was part of, when social media came out, and I was also part of when we got to a point of working remotely. And so I think in general, generations aside, having a mindset where you're open to change, and a mindset where you are accepting of new ways of working is really key, especially in the way that we work today.
Excellent. Thank you, Jerry, for your question. I see a couple of other questions appearing. Don't be afraid. I will not put your question in the live if you're not comfortable with that. I did Jerry because I know Jerry is fine with it, and we both know Jerry, so there's no problem about that. But if you want your question just to be mailed anonymously, you can also do that. Don't have any fears about it. Again, just a quick warm up. This is a live podcast, not a recording, so everything is happening live. We are receiving the questions live. We are trying to build this interaction. We're trying to build this collaboration between the guest and the audience. So feel free to say hello. If you are watching this, let us know where you are, and if you have any comments or that you want to share with Darcie and myself today. And let's get back to the collaboration. So yes, the pandemic forced us to move into remote collaborations, and we had to adapt in our behavior. We had to change it of functioning. Unfortunately, as we were sort of forced to transition to these ways of working, nobody really told people how to do it. We were told to do it, but we were not told how to do it and how to effectively collaborate. And so I want to seize this occasion to sort of replay a little bit this and give people a bit of tips on how to effectively collaborate. So if we go back to, okay, what is collaboration? What are the things that we need to do? For example, if we start with feedback, giving feedback, how would you give feedback that helps and doesn't hurt?
Yeah. So I think feedback is a really big part of building a culture around collaboration and a culture of transparency and trust. And so when we talk about feedback, it can come in lots of ways. I think that there's team feedback, there's individual feedback, there's company-wide feedback. And, oftentimes I think in, a more kind of structured corporate environment, feedback is something that comes every 6 months to a year. It usually comes through your manager, someone above you. And a lot of times it's not actionable. It's specific comments that somebody might have mentioned. And I think we have to kind of move away from that approach to feedback. And the reason being that when you share feedback that's coming 6 months to a year later, you have lost the context. Oftentimes the feedback doesn't include the context when it's presented in that way. And then you're unable to really I guess, draw something actionable out of that, right? And so when I've seen work best when it comes to feedback is as a team, working towards maybe weekly or bi-weekly. In the software world, we call it working in sprints, but having what they refer to as a retrospective at the end of each sprint. That as a team, you're collaboratively and as a group contributing to thinking back about the last couple weeks of work and considering how you might improve upon that, right? And so using some kind of structured format or facilitated format for feedback is really great as a team. And when you do it pretty often, it also is helping you in keeping close to the context of when that feedback was given and what it is that you want to change. And you can quickly and actionably move forward into working better together. And so I see that question from Venus where she was asking about how do you encourage team members to be on camera when they don't want to. That's something that could come up through a retrospective, and you can provide that feedback to a team. You want it to be actionable, so you could say something like, it seems that not everyone is presenting themselves on camera. Sometimes that makes it hard for us to collaborate, right? You don't want to point fingers at an individual person when it's team feedback. So another way that we do feedback is one-on-one, obviously. And one-on-one feedback I think, can be a little bit more sensitive, especially if it's maybe brought up in the wrong way. So if somebody is pointing fingers and saying that you did this wrong and you're making this worse, or kind of making it really about the other person, that's probably not going to be a great conversation. And so when I think about giving feedback, what I like to think about is talking about how you feel. So especially in a one-on-one conversation. So if you start with the action that another person took made me feel a certain way, then it takes the kind of focus off the other person doing something wrong. And it's more about this thing, I feel this way because of this action. It kind of opens up a conversation rather than pointing fingers and potentially creating more conflict. I think always giving constructive and actionable feedback is really, really important. So if you are giving someone feedback, you also want to give them a way to maybe improve that. And then the other thing that's important is if you're giving feedback, you should ask for feedback in return. So make sure that, it's not just about you and what you feel. It's also about how that might make the other person feel. And then there's also company-wide feedback, which is a little bit different. I think retrospectives work really well for company-wide feedback as in addition to as teams. It can be a little bit more difficult to coordinate that. And I think, when we talk about virtual, hybrid, and remote workforce, a company-wide feedback would be a really great thing to do in person. And it would also be a really great thing to do almost like as a yearly retreat. So when you're thinking about maybe a strategy for the coming year as a business leader, doing some kind of retrospective and some kind of in-person collaboration will really go miles in building your culture, and especially a culture around trust and transparency.
Yes, absolutely. For me, the really important insight that changed the impact of the feedback I was giving to people was to follow up.
Mm,
So giving the feedback to people, but then coming back to them and say, "Hey, how's it going? Did you manage to progress?" And sort of keep keep on this momentum. And the other thing that you mentioned is, yeah, give feedback to people. Always end on an open note, saying, "Hey, this is the feedback. How can I help you? How can I help you um, make it actionable? Do you have any blockers that I can sort of maybe remove from you?" And sort of project yourself in the feedback and be an actor of the feedback itself, so that people that it's not just, "Oh, oh, this is what I need to change, or this is what I need to do, but that person is also going to help me be part of the transformation.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of something else, which is feedback can
Go
be
ahead.
negative, but it can also be positive. And so when you're giving feedback, make sure to include the things that people are doing well, in addition to something that they might be able to improve upon. And so sometimes when I'm facilitating a retrospective, I always like to end on something positive. So instead of it going all into like, what are the things that are actionable and how can we change? I often will end on the positive note. Some people will also say you can begin on the positive note. So it just depends. I see
Yes,
what.
exactly. We we tend to focus only on the negative aspects, but highlighting the behaviors, the good actions, and the small wins is also very, very important. So um, I totally agree. I totally agree. Petra mentioned that the right communication is the most important, and the right communication is not always the same one for everyone. So you have to find the one that works best with the person you are interacting with.
Yeah. Well, and what I find is kind of a personal value is leading with empathy. And that can be something that's built into company culture as well. And so Petra's comment on the right communication and your thought about everyone kind of communicates differently. I think that starts with having empathy with how things work for people. Another thing that I kind of like to take away is not to take things personally, especially in the workforce. Most people have good intent in everything that they do. I would like to say all people even have good intent. And so when you're receiving feedback, kind of really try to step out of any kind of emotional aspects about that and really, think and assume positive intent.
Absolutely, absolutely. Agreed with all of that. Let me drop another ad for people who are joining us right now. Live podcast. It's not a recording. So feel free to interact with us through the comments and ask your questions to our guest Darcie. Today we are talking about the importance of collaboration. So let us know what you think and if you have any questions for Darcie today. Um, so we discussed how to give feedback, the mistakes to avoid in giving feedback. Um, Now I would like to dive a bit more into some of the questions that we received from the audience. One of the questions was how to get past managers who don't see collaboration as productive. Did you experience that? And how did you
Yeah. I don't recall who it was that posted this question, but I know that we got some questions via social before we started today. And so when you think about getting your manager kind of on board with collaboration and seeing it as productive, I feel like the best way is to kind of get them involved. Invite your managers to a collaboration session, and especially in points where you're doing some shared decision making. A lot of times what I see is, if you run a workshop or a collaborative session and that the shared decision making is not something the manager agrees with, it might just be a reaction to they didn't make that decision themselves. And so when you can bring them into the process, I think that's really, really helpful. I know that that's not always possible. And so some other ways that I see it working is, showing your work. Oftentimes we use either a physical or virtual whiteboard to map out whatever collaboration focus we're working towards. So if it's a brainstorm, if it's a retro, you can take screenshots if it's virtual. I like to take screenshots when I have people on camera. So like I'm actually getting people who are on Zoom or whatever, and people who are working in a virtual whiteboard. You can do this also, obviously, in a physical session, session as well, where, if you're on an in-person meeting, you can take pictures of your whiteboard. And I think being transparent about that helps managers in understanding. And then there's other things like, if you can find some measure of success, at the end of the day, that's what managers care about is, how is this impacting them? And so obviously in working in collaboration, a lot of that is qualitative measures. But if you can compare effectiveness of, a meeting that you had in the past compared to a collaboration session, and you can talk about the outcomes and the actual outcomes that were facilitated through a workshop versus maybe some non-actionable outcomes that came from a meeting where people just talked at each other and nothing really came out of it. That is an example of a measure of qualitative success.
Love it. Brilliant. Actionable tips. We have a really nice message from Venus here. I want to share it with everyone. Let me display it.
Thank you.
So Venus added something on top of the feedback session. So she said, I personally make sure I hear my teammates' point of view too. Sometimes with giving feedback, but we actually don't know the reason behind their approach, which means maybe we were wrong in the first. Just sharing what I've learned in my personal feedback session. Thank you so much for adding on to this topic, Venus. That actually reminds me of a story a workshop, and one of the participants was reluctant to turn on the or even speak. And by investigating a bit more, we realized that the person didn't have the right tools, the right gear, the right microphone and headphones, and even the camera on the laptop was actually deactivated by the company for security reasons, and so they were not able to to fully participate to those events. And if we didn't investigate a bit more, we wouldn't have known that the person was interested in collaborating more, doing his face and talking, but he had a hardware issue, and couldn't join in. And so the minute we sort of dived and investigated a bit more into what was the problem, and we just went into I think it was Amazon or something like that, and we got this 1 day shipping to get him a camera and a proper headphone, and the following able to jump into the meetings, and that improved the collaboration right away.
Yeah. Interesting how the tech of everything that we have to work through can actually be the problem, which is what going back to empathy of don't assume the worst, assume the positive intent. And I love that story.
Yeah, exactly. Intent. Maybe people have problems. They want to, but they just can't, and they may shy to ask or too shy to mention their situation. And so it's up to us to also try to understand and try to find that. So yes, absolutely, Venus is on point. I think next time we should just do a panel conversation with Jerry and Venus and get all of them into the studio so we can have a panel
I love it.
conversation for next time. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys are interested. Next time, let's just do a panel, because you have amazing experiences and stories to share with the world, and it would be a shame to miss all of that. Um, Another comment. Did you read the comment from Kat?
I did, yeah, and I'd love to address that if you want to like highlight that question.
Yeah, sure. Let me put it here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Go ahead and read it if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay,
Okay.
I'll read it. So Kat says, designers can be extremely territorial of their work. Wink, wink. Designer to designer on a collaborative project. What's a strategy you might suggest to help bridge the gap and help inspire true collaborations for the sake of the end goal when you are remote? It is true that when we are in design mode, there's this artsy spirit and we are creating our babies, and we have a hard time sort of onboarding other people, and design one of your big forte. So, what do you think about it?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I actually understand this experience quite well because I had a transition in my career where I went from working in environments where, basically as a designer, you were kind of heads down doing your own thing. You weren't actually sharing the result of the work until it was completely done. Um, and it kind of creates this almost like, this tendency to hold on, right? Like you get a little bit fearful. You don't want, you're worried what people are going to think, and I think that's, like you mentioned, part of the creative spirit is, being a little bit sensitive, being a little bit territorial. And so some of the things that have helped me in transitioning into being a person who now loves to collaborate on the designs that I work with is one, iterative design processes, right? So in software, what we talk about when we say iterative design is we're sharing early and often, and usually with our end users, because the feedback from an end user is most important to the end result of the designs, right? In other industries, you can still work iteratively, and maybe you don't include user feedback necessarily, but you would be including team feedback. And so what that means for me is maybe I'm sketching out a solution. I'm going to get feedback when my design is at a level of sketches, when it's maybe pencil and pen, and maybe even when I'm mood boarding. So I'm starting to get feedback as soon as I have something that can be shareable. Then maybe I've moved into a low fidelity kind of version of design in software. We call that wireframing, where things are maybe in black and white or grayscale, and you're not really thinking totally about the visual design aspects yet. That's another place and milestone where you can start getting feedback. And so as you iteratively move towards a more final design, and eventually you'll have kind of some rounds of visual design as well, that iterative approach, and kind of getting feedback at different milestones starts to change the mindset of how you work together, and I think ultimately just leads to better collaboration. So the other thing that I can think of that's a tangible kind of activity for improving collaboration, and this can work in the remote setting as well, is doing what we call design pairing. And pairing, or the model of pairing, comes from paired programming. So the way it works with engineers is you have two engineers, two screens, one computer, two keyboards, two mouses. You have one engineer who's called the driver and one engineer who's called the observer. And basically, they're working on the same kind of code base at the same time. And through multiple studies, we've found that this is actually more productive than somebody working by themselves. And the reason being that oftentimes with engineering, and I think this happens with design and other disciplines as well, is you're kind of really thinking through something, and sometimes you get stuck. And so when you have a driver and an observer, you are kind of putting two minds towards the same problem. And this works really well with designers, and especially with some of the tools that we have today, like Figma, where you can actually work in the same page and design file at the same time. And the Adobe Creative Suite does some of this as well. So the idea of actually pairing with somebody working on the same problem at the same time really is driving collaboration in a different way. So I think all these things are approaches to getting somebody more accustomed to the idea of sharing their work early and often, and actually having shared decision making in the design process. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Kat.
Awesome. I actually want to rebound to the topic because Jerry had a question earlier in the live that sort of is connected with this. What are the common blockers you see to effective collaboration? If you have any any tips to overcome, so you mentioned the pairing. What are the other blockers that you typically see and address?
Yeah. Well, I think I talked a little bit about some of them at the beginning when I talked about what
Yeah.
collaboration is not. But when we talk about blockers, I think a lot of it is mindset. People have to overcome this idea of being fearful of sharing their work. And this goes back to empathy, right? When you're talking about changing the way that we work together, there gets to be people who are kind of set in their approaches, and it's uncomfortable to experience change. Riley, you and I have worked in innovation spaces. I think change is just part of the job. And so I've really come
Mm.
to a place in my life and my career where I like change. I get excited about change. I get excited about experimentation and learning something new. And I also understand that not everyone has that same approach and excitement about life and about their work. And so, some people might take a little bit longer to come around to change, but I think at the root of it is fear, and I think fear is the biggest blocker to collaboration, and collaboration in the way that we're talking about it here today, because it can be a change in the way that people are working, a change in their mindset, a change in their culture as a company. And so I think that really is the biggest blocker. But as far as tips, I think it's really about experimentation, trying things out, figuring out what works, learning from that, having, a cycle of feedback that's more frequent, and whether that be feedback between teammates and individuals, or, like we were talking about with design, getting feedback from your users, really just kind of incorporating that into your process and being okay with that, and recognizing that, feedback can come from all places. I think, especially as a designer, you're getting feedback from multiple places. You're getting feedback from your user, you're getting feedback from your business, you're getting feedback maybe from the product side of the organization or engineering side of the organization, and you really have to balance all of that. And so, a lot of times what we say is, you have to, we're user first in the way we work in software, and so we prioritize user feedback, but business feedback is just as important. And so I think all of this comes down to, transparency and trust, and really kind of building that into your culture.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to add to that, something that helped me a lot, sort of collaboration within teams, is really understanding, or if not considering, collaboration as a skill. It's a skill that people need to master. And if when you look at it as a skill point of view, then you understand that not everyone is at the same level. You have black belts of collaboration, but you also have of collaboration. And so the minute you consider, okay, maybe collaboration is a skill, and so we need to teach people this new skill, and so it forces you to set up or at least design a learning curve, uh, and then make it really custom for everyone. So the thing that you do eventually is draft a sort of a, a learning program for collaboration that has milestones, or maybe even gamify it, and say, okay, for the level ones, for the white belts, maybe the first thing that they need to learn or practice is this, and then the more you go right, the more you get into the pairings and all of these things. And that forces you to understand that, sorry, by saying collaboration is a skill, that forces you to identify that there are levels, identify that everyone is at a particular stage, and then they need to get to the final point where you want people to get. And so you can create custom learning curves for everyone, and sort of use that empathy factor in the learning process.
I love that.
Wow, we're talking about gamification, so I'm already in. I'm hooked. I'm hooked.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah, that helped me a lot.
Yeah.
We have just a couple of more minutes left. I want to ask you one quick question, and then we can do a final round of back and forth with the attendees.
Okay.
a quick question would be, if you had to fill in the blanks in the following sentence, what would is too short?
Oh, I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, so I would like you to complete the sentence. Life is too short.
To okay, life is too short not to experiment.
Okay, life
And
is too short.
not to learn from what is perceived as a failure. So if you're experimenting and things don't go right, there's always something to be learned. And I think when we talk about, and just kind of building off what you just said of collaboration as a skill set, and there's people on a different spectrum of that, you're going to move towards getting a culture that's built around collaboration and trust by experimenting and learning from your experiments. And so, yeah, life is too short not to experiment.
I love it. I love it. So that's saved. Now let's do a final roundtable of the question. Oh, Kat agrees with you. 100,000%. I love it. I love it. So questions. Yeah, Jerry agrees. He loves that answer. If you have any more questions for Darcie today, write them down in the chat because we have just a couple of minutes left.
I did have one more question that had come up in our social chats earlier, and that being about how does collaboration help with innovating on processes. And so I think we've talked a lot about, how collaboration can be part of your culture. And I think that also leads to innovating your processes. And so when I think about, how does it help? I feel like the perspective of making shared decisions is really, really important. And building processes in where shared decision making is not only the ownership of leadership, but also the people that are contributors to the day-to-day work. And so what this does is it gives people, across the entire company ownership, and especially when involving people in strategic direction. So we talked earlier about, doing retreats as a company. That's a great thing to incorporate into your processes. And oftentimes when companies do retreats, it's, at a yearly increment or maybe bi-yearly increment. And often it's to help in forming strategic direction. And so when you're bringing everyone in the company into those kinds of processes, they really feel like they are part of the company. They feel like they have some ownership in the direction that the company is headed. And they really feel, heard and seen. So when we think about, innovating in our workflows, collaboration is really a great place to start. Because when people have ownership and then ultimately autonomy, that shared knowledge and alignment really leads to innovation and streamlining your processes.
Wonderful. I love it. And yeah, innovation is something really important in companies nowadays. So we need to innovate. They tell us what to do, but they don't tell us how to do it. And collaboration is an important part of it. We are about to close the session, but before that, I want to ask you one. How can we reach out to you? How can we collaborate with you?
Yes. Well, so I would say one is most of you are all connected with me on LinkedIn. If you're not, please do. I'll include my LinkedIn profile here in the chat. The other thing is I am currently kind of doing, oh, did you close the chat? Sorry.
No, it's here.
Oh, no, okay. It's saying it's failed to post. All right. I will include
I'll do it. I will do it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'll include the link in the event page itself. So the other thing is I am currently kind of doing some research because I think every new venture starts off well with research. So if anyone here that's joined us today is interested in talking to me about the collaboration at their company and their team and the problems that they see, I would love to have a conversation. So I'm also going to include a Calendly link here to schedule a discovery chat with me. And this would give us a chance to discuss, kind of how I might be able to help maybe your organization or others. I'm, in a business development phase. So right now, I really kind of want to learn as much as I can as far as what works and what doesn't work for companies and individuals.
Excellent. So if you Darcie collaborate with Darcie, reach out on her LinkedIn account. And Darcie is also running a little bit of research, so she could definitely benefit from your input. We also have her Calendly link, and we'll probably copy paste that into the LinkedIn chat
You know what?
well, because
I
this one
think
is the
I gave
this one
you
is
the
the
wrong.
one.
I gave you the wrong Calendly link, so I'm going to have you.
No
I'm going to
worries.
send it to you again. Sorry about that.
So we are going to add it into the comments of the event, the description of the event, so that people can jump in and reach out to you. Good with that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Excellent.
This was a great conversation, and thank you, Riley, for having me today.
Oh, my pleasure, and I'm really happy because this was your first podcast, right?
Technically, yeah, I've done plenty of like live events, but not a podcast like this. Thank you for having me as a
Excellent,
guest.
and you did amazingly well. I want to thank all our attendees and the ones who were super acting, Kat, Venus, Jerry. Thank you so much for interacting with us and making this an amazing live event. Um, Feel free to reach out to Darcie. You have medias. Feel free to reach out to the people who attended the event. And if you want more of these kind of, let me know with a comments or a message. Thank you for all the LinkedIn people on LinkedIn, YouTube. I think we also live on X. So the last thing I want to say is life is too short not to experiment and learn from it. See you next time.
Cheers.